My favorite scripture
Please.
is in Proverbs 3 and 5. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not to your own understanding, but in all of your ways acknowledge Him, and He will direct your paths.
Man, I'm excited for us to have this conversation, Rodney Pearson, Dr. Rodney Pearson, just so you know. But I want to say this because I'm super excited to talk about some of the stuff that you got going on, which you're extremely busy. And not only that, I really want to educate people on what you kind of have coming down the pipeline so we can talk about the future and what that looks like. But before we get started, I'm always excited to have you as a guest on University Through Adversity. We talk about multiple topics, multiple issues, education. I mean, you name it, we cover it. But today, we're actually at a great location, Flavors of Louisiana, and I'm excited to have, Dr. Pearson, who invited us to shoot here, present. So give us a little bit of background on yourself first.
Okay, myself. Well, I'm from Southern California. People ask me where I'm from. I tell them, well, Hollywood, but it's actually Compton. So,
Okay, Compton.
It's actually Compton, so which is down the street, if you will, 10 miles or so from Compton.
Sure.
But yeah, I grew up there in Compton. I actually found myself in a position where I dropped out of high school.
Okay.
Dropped out of high school because I wasn't into the guns, I wasn't into the gangs.
Sure.
And I was really into staying alive. That was a big thing. Okay?
You don't have to tell me. I'm very aware. I'm very aware.
Many of my friends and people who I grew up with died in that community because of drugs, because of the gang violence and what have you. I ended up leaving when I was about 20 years old, after I got married and moved out and decided to go to what's called the Inland Empire in Southern California. Which is a better community.
Made a transition.
Made a transition.
Okay.
And kept transitioning because I joined the Army.
Okay.
All right. Kept moving on, and was a chaplain's assistant in the Army.
Interesting.
Yes.
Interesting.
Chaplain's assistant. So some people say to me, well, you left the guns and the violence and joined the Army. What's that about?
Yeah. It's like it's a play on words.
Exactly.
You're doing it like, no, that's good.
But yeah, I was a person that was in the chapel, working with people who would come in, people who wanted to transition into the military, out of the military, divorces, people who are having severe mental health issues, all that stuff. So if you would think about it, that's kind of how I began my journey of mental health. Well, actually, I'm wrong because my brother is special needs.
Okay.
So my brother had these special needs. He was institutionalized during a time that mental health was looked at as the only way to deal with it was to institutionalize it.
Interesting. And so you got a chance to witness, observe, and really see it unfold with your brother.
Firsthand. He had a lot of issues that we as kids had to deal with every day. He had temper tantrums. He was diagnosed with schizoaffective paranoia. It was a tremendous experience growing up. But we learned to love unconditionally.
Man.
Because although he had all of these issues, he was still my brother.
Well, and I love what you just said, and that's one of the things that we're going to talk about a little bit. Loving unconditional.
Yeah.
And people don't understand how big of a deal that is.
It's a big deal.
Because, we always, unfortunately, we live in this judgment culture, this cancel culture, and we decide that, well, we'll just stay away from them instead of just giving them love. Big deal. So I want to talk a little bit about, your educational background, because you are a doctor.
That's
and then I want to talk a little bit about what you're currently doing. So give us a little bit of background on what you did from an educational perspective, so people who are tuning in can really wrap their minds around how intelligent this man is. So that's just real talk. But go ahead, give us some history.
I dropped out of high school.
Right.
I dropped out of high school.
Yeah, you told me that.
Yeah, and so when I dropped out of high school, it didn't mean that I didn't want to be educated or I didn't know the value of education. Like I said, I just wanted to live.
Right.
So I used to take the bus from Compton all the way into downtown LA, which is about a 2-hour ride.
Wow.
To go to an adult school when I dropped out of school.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Go to an adult school.
That's a big deal first.
It's a big deal.
I mean, first and foremost, getting on a bus and riding for 2 hours, I don't know if you've ever ridden a bus, but the bus experience is not the best.
In LA.
In LA. Go ahead. I'll be quiet because I can get going. You know that, right?
Yeah. So I would do that because I really wanted to continue my education.
Right.
But I joined the military, as I said, and when I joined the military, I saw that there was an opportunity to go to school. And I started taking classes because I wanted to get my GED.
Right.
And that was the only thing that really mattered to me, was going to school and getting my GED.
Right, which is a big deal.
It was a big deal.
Absolutely.
I wanted to be able to feed my family.
Sure.
And I could not feed my family without a high school diploma. That was certainly was the thinking at that time. So I went ahead, started going to adult school, and I didn't get my GED. I didn't get my GED.
Okay. Keep going.
I joined the Army.
You joined the Army.
When I joined the Army, I started taking classes, and that's where I got my GED while in the Army.
Interesting.
Yes.
Interesting. So even though you was riding the bus 2 hours downtown to LA, that wasn't how you got your education. It
didn't start that way.
Okay.
It just was the concept, if you will, of continuing the educational
process. That says a lot, though. That says a lot, because that means that you had a vision that you saw yourself continuing, and you knew you had to have education as part of it.
Exactly.
Okay.
In that process, I can, people call me today a professional student because I'm 67 years old and I'm still in a PhD program. I already have 2 doctorate degrees. I've received my bachelor's degree and I have a bachelor's of science. I also have my AA degree. I majored in psychology.
Okay.
I continued to go to school because I knew that was the way. Number one, if you were going to really make any money, you had to have some education behind it.
You have to have education.
My mother was a teacher. She was a special ed teacher, and my father was a mechanic. Okay?
Gotcha.
More of a shade tree mechanic. He wasn't what we would consider a licensed professional mechanic.
Right.
But he was the person who, in my life, was a great influence because he was put out of his profession because of technology.
Interesting.
All right. He worked for a tire company, and the tire company automated the service that he used to do.
Gotcha.
And he ended up, became a shade tree mechanic, trying to feed his family.
Understood.
Okay?
Understood.
So we grew up there in Compton, went to school there in Compton, tried to maneuver around all of the gang violence to keep going.
Right.
But like I said, I eventually wanted to make sure that I had the education that I needed to qualify. Now, let me tell you the bad part about that story.
Please.
I went to school, and I was going to a Bible college, and I was gaining my degree, worked my way up to a master's, only to find out when I went to apply for a job, a master's level job, that my degree was unaccredited.
Really?
Yes.
And so even though you went through the process of being disciplined, showing up, doing your homework, everything to make sure you could get the credentials, then you find out it's not going to help you make any money.
Not going to help me.
Are you serious?
Not going to help me make a dime. And so I ended up coming to Arizona. But before I came to Arizona, that's when I found out that my degrees were bogus or unaccredited. But before then, I was in the mental health field. I'd worked in hospitals, in the psychiatric department, but I was at the lower level, lower level of everything.
Sure.
So eventually I realized that's the field that I wanted to be in.
Well, and I want to stop you right there because, and this goes back to, your upbringing and then dealing with your brother and some of that stuff is all connected.
Yeah.
And so people don't realize, and I want to say this because I'm sure we're going to talk about what you do honoring God, but God already has it written.
He already had it.
It's already written.
Yeah.
And so the problem is we think we have the solution and we 100% wrong.
Yeah.
So we got to be humble enough to follow his direction.
My favorite scripture
Please.
is in Proverbs 3:5. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not to your own understanding, but in all of your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths.
And now, and I want to just take a moment because we're getting ready to jump a little bit in the conversation, because obviously he did get his education to support what he's doing, but I really want to shift and talk about what he's doing right now, and that's where I get excited, because we have to be willing to realize we may not have all the answers because we've never lived our lives at this point in our journey. Yeah. So sometimes we got to be willing to take a step back and go, you know, I don't know what I'm getting ready to do.
Right.
And when you open yourself up, that's when the blessings will show up. But tell us what you're doing right now. You already know. I can get going. You know that, right?
That's all right, man. That's all right. So what I have is a dream that's coming to fruition.
Yes.
As we speak.
As we speak.
First, in 2012, I opened an agency called Rodney Behavioral Agency. And Rodney was about providing home-based community services.
Right.
Now, home-based community services is a major thing, because what I did is we provided habilitation services, we provided respite services, we had a center that was for children, what was called a place where the kids could come who had autism, kids who had mental illness, all of that kind of stuff.
It's a big deal.
It was a big deal. It was a big deal. But I opened my company during the recession. We were hit hard because of the recession. We had contracted with the state of Arizona. The state of Arizona started pulling back budgets.
Right.
And before we knew it, we were at a place where we had to shut down.
Wow.
But the passion was still there.
Right.
So we shut down the company and continued to do counseling, continued to go to school,
sure,
continued to do other things, because now my education was shifting away from Bible college, because I realized that I could not.
Right, you got to pay the bills.
Couldn't do it.
Got to pay the bills.
So I ended up enrolling in Grand Canyon University, which is a Christian university here.
Yep.
But I enrolled because I wanted to continue down this path of psychology. Before I came to Arizona, I was enrolled in a program, a master's degree in psychology at Christian University in California.
What was the name of the university?
It was Fuller Theological Seminary.
Okay.
Fuller Theological Seminary. And it was completely legitimate.
Okay, so you were getting, it was certified, so once you got it, you received it.
Yes, completely accredited.
Hey, which is super important, as you know.
But I had one of my 4 children who had passed away. The first of my 4 children was killed. And he was killed outside of my church. Came in and asked, "Dad, can I go across the street to go to the store?" Which the kids often did, go across the street to get candy.
Gotcha.
And but it was right about 6 in the evening. It was getting dark.
Okay.
And I told him no. I said, "Don't go." He went anyway because he was with a friend. And the friend said, "We'll go and come back before anybody knows it." And he was killed right there.
Wow.
So,
wow.
My plot after that was, when he was killed, I dropped out of school because the mourning was just too severe.
Sure.
The grieving was more than I anticipated.
Absolutely.
But after that, Derrick, to my surprise, I lost 3 more children after that, for a total of 4 children. And this was probably the most devastating thing. In fact, it was the most devastating thing that ever happened in my life. To lose 4 children, that resulted in my divorce, that resulted in, if you were to follow the path, I wanted to get out of ministry. I wanted to just go be a truck driver somewhere and isolate.
So, I'm listening, and obviously, this is such a profound, insight and message that you're sharing. But I want to take this full circle, because one of the things, remember, we connected at Black Arizona.
That's correct.
That's where we started to build our relationship.
Right.
But one of the things that I really take a little bit of insight and food for thought for you to think about, and maybe even answer, is, how do we deal with hatred and negativity in the Black community, which is a big deal. And so I really want you to think about that, because I want to get a response from you, because it's important. Because I want those who tune into the show to understand, like, you have a person who has navigated the world system, done some unbelievable stuff, but he has insight to pour back into communities where we can get information so we can become better and a better version of ourselves. So,
Excellent.
yeah,
Yeah.
you know,
Okay. That's
okay.
Good. Well, after the loss of my 4 children, I realized that there certainly had to be more that I needed to do. So I could have drowned in the misery, in the grief, in the disappointment, and the frustration.
Man.
But this is the power of God.
Okay.
This is the power of God.
Okay.
Because I found joy in all of that I had gone through. Because rather than looking at poor old me, I said, thank you, God, that you gave me these many years to pour into the lives of these children, and I fathered them the way that would make you proud.
Absolutely.
To make my community proud. And I know for a fact that my children were in good hands. But it destroyed so much in me.
Right.
Destroyed. And I began to really pursue this path of helping others. I became a grief counselor. I became a crisis counselor.
Yes.
I continued to do the work for other people. As I said, I worked in a hospital, in the psychiatric ward, continued to do that. And when I came to Arizona, which is what leads us to where I am now.
Yep.
I was working for a company, and I was working with the group homes. And the company that was, it was a thriving company, it was a wonderful company. But what I found is that there was so much that I needed to know.
Sure.
I started understanding more about people. You know, I'm dealing with people who were substance abusers, or people who are dealing with addictions, people who were homeless, people who had mental illness. Now I'm dealing with this on another level because I'm working with these people every day.
Sure.
And that's what led me to open my company, okay? Rodney West, the Rodney West Agency was, okay, we need to do this. Recession came in, now I'm about to jump forward. We got past the recession.
Right.
But I felt God was saying he wasn't finished.
No,
Even though we shut down the company,
right.
he wasn't finished. I went back to school now to become a professional counselor. No more, I mean, it wasn't that I stopped in ministry, but my focus was now professional counseling.
Sure.
I earned a bachelor's in professional counseling, bachelor's of science, and I earned my master's in professional counseling.
Right.
And then I decided, let's go all the way. Let's go all the way. And all the way was, we're going to not just look at one segment of the community, but we're going to open up to as many as we can.
Absolutely.
In 2016, I opened another company called Brothers United Against Domestic Violence. I'm going to show you how all things come together.
Oh, yeah.
Because as I was working as a crisis counselor, the majority of my clients were women who had been abused in their homes.
Interesting.
I'm sitting in the room with women and who are trying to protect their children.
Of course.
I vividly remember sitting with a woman who had 5 kids and couldn't go home.
Right.
5 kids. And this was a repeated situation.
Sure.
Okay?
Sure.
But what it did for me is it made me start asking the women in my family, can you talk to me about any experiences that you've had? Come to find out, my own daughter had been abused. Found out my wife had also been abused.
Sure.
My grandmother had been abused. My sister had been abused. These were things that until I was exposed in the way that I was, when somebody said, yeah, well, I was beat up by my husband, I just said, wow, so glad that,
that you're okay.
That you're okay.
Sure.
And then move on. But once I got into listening to these stories and hearing the journeys that these people had gone into, I decided I needed to do something.
Absolutely.
My wife and I and my sister, we opened up Brothers United Against Domestic Violence.
And, that's so powerful because, I think about, I think Adam is part of that as well, correct? Or maybe I'm not sure the name that I'm saying, but there's a young man who is
Earl. You're talking
Earl.
Earl. That's my son.
That's what I'm saying.
That's okay.
Adam popped into my mind. Maybe
I didn't know whether you were going back to the Garden of Eden. Where were we going?
Earl, because Earl plays a role as well. Correct.
All right. He is a vice president of the company.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
No, it's good because me and him had a great conversation, and I think it's important because, especially as men, because I've been in that space too.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, it wasn't me being the victim. I was being the victimer.
Okay.
So it's important to really educate people on what's happening, because there's a lot of dynamics go on in families, and people don't want to talk about it. But we have to. We have to.
And pay attention
man
to
up and really figure out solutions.
Yeah, because I brushed it off.
Absolutely.
Because I wasn't dealing with it. I wasn't a victimizer. I was not a perpetrator. The people in my immediate circle, I thought, had never been abused until I began to listen to them more deeply.
Absolutely.
We opened up that company in 2016. And as we opened that company, we found that there were many, many people. And the emphasis of our company was prevention.
Right.
Because there were many, many people who were dealing with the issue of helping the victim.
Yes.
But I saw my black men, black women, who this was at a higher rate, domestic violence was at a higher rate.
Absolutely.
And these people were in jail, in prison. Their whole lives were being changed because they never got a message of prevention. And they didn't know what were some of the tools that they could have used. So that's what Brothers United Against Domestic Violence was all about.
Yep.
The next piece was God spoke and said we needed to bring back Rodtree that had been shut down.
Yes.
And when we decided to bring back Rodtree, it had more of a counseling emphasis because now I'm licensed. Now I am a professional. And I can do something based on my knowledge, not just based on my emotional connection.
Sure.
So I'm able now to provide trauma-based treatment. I'm able to provide the kinds of modalities that help people get through all kinds of issues with actual evidence-based treatment. Right. So that's where my life began to take a turn, and now we're in the process of opening Rodtree, behavioral health and wellness. Here's a turn, the twist. Arizona just recently experienced a major turn in the healthcare industry. Within 2 years ago, they set up a moratorium where they realized there was a lot of fraud going on in this industry.
Yes.
Well, 2 years ago was when we reopened Rodtree.
Interesting.
And so at the time that we reopened, at the time we signed a lease for a building, at the time we're ready to help people, the moratorium falls, we can't get licensed. We can't get licensed.
This is the second time we keep talking about credentials being taken away. That's interesting.
Second time we can't get licensed.
Wow.
And so as of today, it has been a year and a half that we have had a lease on a building, paying thousands of dollars on a building that we could not open.
I want to say this, and then I want to take this full circle because, sometimes you weren't prepared and God didn't open the door yet, and you need to get more information so that you could literally not only open, but then make the biggest impact possible with what God has already given you. And then I want to bring this up. Obviously, you're the senior pastor, and I want you to talk a little bit about what you're doing, not just in the mental health space and supporting people and awareness, but also how you pouring into the community from a spiritual perspective.
Well, it all lines up with Rodtree Behavioral Health and Wellness because we were going to just be a counseling company, if you will.
Okay.
And in being a counseling company, we would provide the therapeutic modalities to help people, but because we couldn't get licensed, we know we needed more. We got a building, we can't open, what are we going to do?
What are we going to do?
We begin to merge the whole aspect of wellness into our counseling.
Yes, I see it.
So now wellness, behavioral health, and then the spiritual part is right around the corner from the building that I lease is my church.
Okay.
Faith, Hope, and Love Community Church.
I love that.
In Buckeye. Okay?
I love that. I love it.
So it is a big, all of these pieces came together one after the other. And no, I don't believe any of it was an accident.
It's not a coincidence.
No, it's not a coincidence, right?
Well, and I want to add, God just doesn't make mistakes.
No.
And so you've been called to do it. You have the experience, the credentials, the heart, and not only that, the love that you carry, which is why we connected. As soon as we saw each other, it was it was almost like we played together.
Love at first sight. Love at first sight.
But the big thing is, and then I want to shift, because I really want you to pour in at the end of this conversation. Like, in my mind, I keep thinking all the stuff that you're doing and all the impact that you're having on multiple levels. If you had one thing, one piece of advice or direction or information that you could share with the next generation, meaning like your son, like like him, like his age, like what would that be? Because I really want you to process, because a lot of times our kids are they really don't want to listen. Man, they don't want to listen. All right.
Okay, so after I lost 4 children, right, I married this wonderful, beautiful, precious woman, Trina. My wife is not here today.
Right.
Because she is conducting a session with a group called Journey to Joy. She's one who's been abused, one who has had severe trauma. But God put me together with this woman who had 6 children, 4 of which were here in Arizona. So I lost 4 children, but became the stepfather for 4 children here in Arizona.
Man.
Right?
Man.
Earl, who you spoke of, is one of those.
Okay.
One of those children. And what the big message that even though my kids may not have followed my path, my Christian, path completely, they know God, they love God, and they have heard me teach for the 20 years that I've been married to this woman about unconditional love.
Unconditional love.
That is what all of this comes around to, Derrick.
Okay.
All of this comes around to unconditional love. Teaching people in the community, whether they're sitting at church, whether they are abroad and in my community or my family, have all heard me speak on the issue of unconditional love. I wrote a book called The Doctrine of Agape. The Doctrine of Agape. And that book outlines my journey and how I found out about unconditional love. Because unconditional love really means unconditional love.
It does.
And unfortunately, even in the Christian community, we put conditions on our love.
Always.
We tell people, if you do this, and then you're welcome, but if you're like this, you're not welcome.
Absolutely.
Once you change, then we can accept you in, but that's not how God's love works.
And God doesn't operate in a space like that.
He doesn't do that
because He has nothing but grace.
Right. That's why I have the church, I have the nonprofit, and then I have our profit organization, Rotary, all of these to invite as many people into this space that we operate in, so that we can touch all of these lives. That's what we are about. That's what we are passionately pursuing.
Well, again, first and foremost, I'm just excited that, one, me having you as a guest has been unbelievable. Some of the stuff that he's doing, some of the initiatives that he's rolling out and bringing to the table will support communities. And then the thing that really resonates with me, as you already know, is the unconditional love side. And that in itself speaks to this man's spirit. Rodney Pearson, you have been unbelievable. Dr. Rodney Pearson. Let me make sure I honor that.
Amen.
But I want you to realize, your presence and you taking time to be part of University Through Adversity is a blessing, and hopefully we have people who tune in and find ways to connect with the good doctor.
Yes. Let me give you my website,
please,
before we move. So you can find out more about me at www.rodtreewest.com. That's where I am. That's who I am. Mostly everything we do is centered in Rodtree Behavioral Health and Wellness. So if you go to that website, rodtreewest.com, you'll be able to read more about what we do.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.